Pharaoh is the vernacular term often used for the monarchs of ancient Egypt, who ruled from the First Dynasty, circa 3150 BCE, until the annexation of Egypt by the Roman Republic in 30 BCE. However, regardless of gender, king was the term used most frequently by the ancient Egyptians for their monarchs through the middle of the 18th dynasty during the New Kingdom. The earliest confirmed instances of Pharaoh, used contemporaneously for a ruler, were a letter to Akhenaten, reigned 1353 to 1336 BCE, or an inscription possibly referring to Thutmose III, reigned 1479 to 1425 BCE. In the early dynasties, ancient Egyptian kings had as many as 3 titles, the Horus, the Sej and Be, and the 2 ladies or Nebati name. The Golden Horus and the Nomen and Prenomen titles were added later. In Egyptian society, religion was central to everyday life. One of the roles of the king was as an intermediary between the deities and the people. The king thus was deputized for the deities in a role that was both as civil and religious administrator. The king owned all of the land in Egypt, enacted laws, collected taxes, and served as commander-in-chief of the military. Religiously, the king officiated over religious ceremonies and chose the sites of new temples. The king was responsible for maintaining Ma'at, or cosmic order, balance, and justice, and part of this included going to war when necessary to defend the country or attacking others when it was believed that this would contribute to Ma'at, such as to obtain resources. During the early days prior to the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt, the deshret or the bread crown was a representation of the kingdom of Lower Egypt, while the hedjet, the white crown, was worn by the kings of Upper Egypt. After the unification of both kingdoms, the Pes Chent, the combination of both the red and white crowns, became the official crown of the pharaoh. With time, new headdresses were introduced during different dynasties such as the Khat, Nemes, Atef, Hemhem crown, and Kepresh. At times, a combination of these headdresses or crowns worn together was depicted. As a central figure of the state, the pharaoh was the obligatory intermediary between the gods and humans. To the former, he ensured the proper performance of rituals in the temples. To the latter, he guaranteed agricultural prosperity, the defense of the territory, and impartial justice. In the sanctuaries, the image of the sovereign is omnipresent through parietal scenes and statues. In this iconography, the pharaoh is invariably represented as the equal of the gods. In the religious speech, he is however only their humble servant, a zealous servant who makes multiple offerings. This piety expresses the hope of a just return of service. Filled with goods, the gods must favorably activate the forces of nature for a common benefit to all Egyptians. The only human being admitted to dialogue with the gods on an equal level. The pharaoh was the supreme officiant, the first of the priests of the country. More widely, the pharaonic gesture covered all the fields of activity of the collective and ignored the separation of powers. Also, every member of the administration acts only in the name of the royal person by delegation of power. From the pyramid texts, the political actions of the sovereign were framed by a single maxim: bring Ma'at and repel ʻfeɪ, that is to say, promote harmony and repel chaos. As the nurturing father of the people, the pharaoh ensured prosperity by calling upon the gods to regulate the waters of the Nile, by opening the granaries in case of famine, and by guaranteeing a good distribution of arable land. Chief of the armies, the pharaoh was the brave protector of the borders. Like Ra, who fights the serpent Apophis, the king of Egypt repels the plunderers of the desert, fights the invading armies, and defeats the internal rebels. The pharaoh was always the sole victor, standing up and knocking out a bunch of prisoners or shooting arrows from his battle chariot. As the only legislator, the laws and decrees he promulgated were seen as inspired by divine wisdom. This legislation, kept in the archives and placed under the responsibility of the vizier, applied to all, for the common good and social agreement.